The morning sun cast long shadows through the tall windows of Clarence's house as Thomas Hartwell adjusted his ceremonial uniform for what he thought would be another ordinary day. As one of Queen Camilla's personal guards, Thomas had served the royal household for 12 years, maintaining the same disciplined routine that had earned him respect among his colleagues and trust from the royal family. Thomas was known for his attention to detail and unwavering dedication. His fellow guards often joked that he could spot a speck of dust from across a room, but this keen eye had served him well in his position. At 42 years old, he had worked his way up from a junior security officer to become one of the most trusted members of Camilla's protection detail. On this particular Tuesday morning in March, Thomas was conducting his weekly security inspection of the Queen Consort's private chambers. This was standard protocol. Every room where royals spent time needed regular security sweeps to ensure no unauthorized devices or potential threats had been introduced. The inspection usually took about an hour and covered everything from checking behind paintings to examining furniture for any signs of tampering. As Thomas entered Camilla's private sitting room, he noticed everything appeared normal. The elegant space was decorated in soft cream and gold tones, with fresh flowers arranged on the antique side tables. Family photographs lined the mantelpiece, and her favorite books were neatly stacked on a reading table by the window. The morning light illuminated the room perfectly, creating the peaceful atmosphere that Camilla so valued in her private retreat. Moving methodically through his checklist, Thomas examined the usual spots: behind curtains, under furniture, around electrical outlets. He was particularly thorough around the small kitchenette area that had been added to the chamber 3 years ago for Camilla's convenience. She often enjoyed preparing her own morning tea and light snacks, finding the simple act of cooking therapeutic after long days of royal duties. The kitchenette was modest, but well-appointed, with modern appliances discreetly integrated to maintain the room's historic character. As Thomas knelt to check the space beneath the small refrigerator, his trained eye caught something unusual. One of the ceramic tiles on the floor appeared slightly raised compared to its neighbors. The difference was minimal, perhaps only a millimeter or two, but to someone with Thomas's experience, it stood out like a beacon. He ran his fingers along the edge of the tile, feeling a slight give that shouldn't have been there. The tile was definitely loose, which was odd considering the entire floor had been professionally installed during the renovation. Thomas knew that loose tiles in royal residences were taken seriously, as they could present a safety hazard to the residents. He decided to investigate further before reporting it to maintenance. Using a small multi-tool from his utility belt, Thomas carefully worked around the edges of the tile. It lifted easily, much more easily than it should have. Underneath, instead of the concrete foundation he expected to see, there was a small, hollow space. The cavity was roughly 8 inches square and about 4 inches deep, lined with what appeared to be waterproof material. Thomas's heart began to race as he realized this was no accidental loose tile. Someone had deliberately created this hidden compartment. His mind immediately went to security protocols. Was this a potential threat? Had someone planted something dangerous beneath the Queen Consort's floor? He carefully examined the space with his flashlight, checking for any obvious dangers before proceeding. Inside the compartment, wrapped in protective plastic, was a manila envelope and what appeared to be a small wooden box. Thomas's hands trembled slightly as he considered his options. Protocol dictated that he should immediately seal the area and call for a full security team, but his curiosity and dedication to protecting Camilla urged him to understand what he had discovered first. The envelope was thick and appeared to contain documents. The wooden box was about the size of a jewelry case, made from what looked like expensive mahogany with intricate carved details. Both items appeared old but well preserved, suggesting they had been hidden for some time. There were no obvious signs of danger. No wires, no chemical smells, nothing that suggested an immediate threat. Thomas made a decision that would change everything. He carefully removed both items from their hiding place, handling them as potential evidence. His training in evidence preservation kicked in as he photographed the scene with his phone before disturbing anything further. He documented the exact position of each item and the condition of the hiding place. The envelope felt substantial in his hands, clearly containing multiple documents. The weight suggested perhaps 20 or 30 pages of paper inside. The wooden box was heavier than expected, indicating it contained something more substantial than simple jewelry. Thomas noticed that both items had a faint scent of lavender, as if they had been stored with sachets to preserve them. As he examined the envelope more closely, Thomas noticed there was no writing on the outside, no names, no dates, no indication of what might be inside. The wooden box similarly bore no external markings that might hint at its contents. The mystery deepened with every observation. Thomas knew he was at a crossroads. He could replace everything exactly as he found it and report the discovery through official channels, which would mean the contents might be examined by multiple people before any action was taken. Or he could carefully examine what he had found first, ensuring he understood the potential implications before involving others. His loyalty to Camilla influenced his decision. If these items contained something that could embarrass or harm her, he wanted to know before anyone else saw them. If they were harmless personal mementos that had been hidden for sentimental reasons, perhaps they could be returned quietly without causing unnecessary drama. If they represented a genuine security threat, he needed to understand the nature of that threat immediately. The weight of responsibility pressed on Thomas's shoulders as he sat back on his heels, the mysterious items in his hands. 12 years of faithful service had prepared him for many situations, but nothing quite like this. He could hear the normal sounds of the household beginning their day. Staff moving through corridors, the distant sound of vacuum cleaners, the gentle hum of everyday palace life. Thomas checked his watch. He had at least another 30 minutes before anyone would expect him to complete his inspection. Camilla was attending a charity breakfast across London and wouldn't return until late afternoon. The timing seemed almost providential, giving him the opportunity to investigate his discovery without immediate pressure. He made his choice. Thomas carefully opened the envelope first, his hands steady despite the magnitude of the moment. Inside were indeed documents, what appeared to be letters written in elegant handwriting, legal papers with official seals, and several old photographs. The paper was high quality, but showed signs of age, with the slightly yellowed appearance of documents that had been stored for decades. The first letter was dated 15 years ago, and was addressed to someone whose name Thomas didn't immediately recognize. As he began to read, his eyes widened with each sentence. The content was far more significant than he had imagined possible. These weren't simple personal mementos or forgotten keepsakes. These documents contained information that could fundamentally alter how the royal family was perceived by the public and potentially change the course of the monarchy itself. Thomas read the first letter 3 times before the words fully sank in. Written in Camilla's unmistakable handwriting, it detailed a conversation she had overheard between senior royal advisors about a decision that had been kept from the public for over a decade. The letter was addressed to someone identified only as "my dearest friend," and appeared to be a way of recording important information that Camilla felt needed to be preserved for posterity. The conversation described in the letter involved a significant financial decision made during a period of economic uncertainty that had affected millions of British citizens. According to Camilla's account, the royal family had been advised to make certain investments that would benefit them personally while potentially disadvantaging public funds that had been allocated for social programs. The letter suggested that Camilla had strongly disagreed with this advice, but had been overruled by more senior family members. Thomas's hands shook as he continued reading. The implications were staggering. If this information were true and became public, It would create a scandal that could seriously damage the reputation of the entire royal family. The letter painted Camilla in a sympathetic light, suggesting she had tried to advocate for the public interest, but had been powerless to prevent decisions she felt were morally questionable. The second letter, dated 2 years later, was even more explosive. It detailed Camilla's growing concerns about the direction of royal policy and her frustration with being unable to influence decisions she felt were harmful to the monarchy's reputation. She wrote about secret meetings where financial advisors had presented strategies for protecting royal wealth that would come at the cost of public programs designed to help struggling families. Thomas set the letters aside and turned to the legal documents. These appeared to be copies of actual contracts and agreements, complete with official seals and signatures. The papers outlined complex financial arrangements involving offshore accounts, property investments, and tax strategies that seemed designed to minimize the royal family's financial obligations while maximizing their returns during a period when the country was facing significant economic challenges. One document particularly caught Thomas's attention. It was a contract dated 8 years ago that involved the sale of certain royal properties to private investors. The terms of the sale appeared to be highly favorable to the buyers, but disadvantageous to the public, who had historically benefited from revenue generated by these properties. The document contained signatures from several high-ranking officials and members of the royal family, but notably, Camilla's signature was absent from the agreement. The photographs in the envelope provided visual evidence to support the written accounts. They showed various meetings taking place in formal settings, with recognizable faces of royal family members and government officials. Some photos appeared to have been taken secretly, capturing moments when the participants clearly believed they were in private. The images showed briefcases being exchanged, documents being signed, and handshakes that suggested deals being finalized. Thomas realized that Camilla had been systematically documenting what she believed to be serious ethical violations within the royal family's financial management. The hidden compartment under the kitchen tile had been her secret archive, a place where she could preserve evidence of activities she felt future generations needed to know about, even if she couldn't act on them immediately. The wooden box proved to contain even more surprising items. Inside, Thomas found a small recording device that appeared to be quite sophisticated despite its age. There were also several memory cards and what looked like a code book with various symbols and numbers that might correspond to dates or locations. A small brass key was wrapped in tissue paper, but Thomas couldn't immediately determine what it might unlock. The most intriguing item in the box was a small notebook filled with Camilla's handwriting. The entries appeared to be a diary of sorts, chronicling her growing awareness of questionable activities within the royal household. The entries spanned several years and painted a picture of someone who had gradually discovered that the institution she had married into was involved in practices that conflicted with her personal values and public statements. One diary entry, dated just 3 years ago, revealed Camilla's internal struggle with her discoveries. She wrote about feeling trapped between her loyalty to her husband and family and her desire to see the monarchy operate with complete integrity. She expressed fear about what would happen if these activities were discovered by investigative journalists or political opponents, but also frustration that she seemed to be the only family member concerned about the ethical implications. Another entry described a particularly difficult conversation with Charles, where she had tried to raise her concerns about certain financial decisions. According to her account, Charles had dismissed her worries and suggested that she didn't understand the complexities of royal finances. The entry revealed her hurt at being excluded from important decisions that she felt affected her reputation as much as anyone else's. Thomas began to understand why these items had been hidden so carefully. Camilla had been collecting evidence not to harm the royal family, but to protect herself, and potentially to ensure that the truth would eventually come to light if circumstances required it. She had been creating a historical record of her attempts to advocate for more ethical practices within the institution. The recording device proved to be functional when Thomas carefully examined it. The battery was long dead, but he could see that it had been used extensively based on wear patterns around the buttons. The memory cards were small, but appeared to be in good condition. Thomas realized that these likely contained audio recordings of conversations that supported the written documentation in the envelope. As he continued reading through the diary entries, Thomas discovered that Camilla had not been working alone in her documentation efforts. She had apparently confided in at least one close friend outside the royal household, someone who had helped her understand the legal implications of what she was discovering. The friend had advised her to preserve evidence carefully in case it was ever needed to protect herself from potential accusations of complicity. The diary also revealed that Camilla had made several attempts to address her concerns through official channels within the royal household. She had spoken with private secretaries, legal advisors, and even senior members of parliament who were known to be supportive of the monarchy. In each case, she had been told that her concerns were either unfounded or that the activities in question were legally permissible, even if they seemed ethically questionable. Thomas found himself developing a new respect for Camilla as he read her account of these frustrating attempts to create change from within. The diary entries showed someone who had tried repeatedly to work within the system before resorting to secret documentation. She had clearly struggled with the decision to begin preserving evidence, viewing it as a betrayal of family trust, even as she felt compelled to protect herself and the institution's long-term reputation. The final entries in the diary were the most recent, dated just 6 months ago. They revealed that Camilla had become aware of new activities that concerned her even more than the previous financial irregularities. She wrote about discussions of potential changes to royal protocols that would further reduce transparency and accountability. She expressed growing fear that the monarchy was moving in a direction that would eventually lead to a crisis of public confidence. Thomas realized he was holding evidence of what amounted to a secret rebellion within the royal family. Camilla had been quietly fighting for integrity and transparency while publicly maintaining the appearance of complete loyalty and support. The hidden compartment represented her private effort to ensure that future historians would have access to the truth about decisions made during this period in royal history. The weight of his discovery pressed heavily on Thomas's mind as he sat surrounded by the evidence. He understood that he now possessed information that could potentially protect Camilla if she ever faced accusations of complicity in questionable activities, but could also seriously damage the reputation of other family members if it became public. The decision of what to do with this information would require careful consideration of loyalty, duty, and the greater good of both the monarchy and the country it served. Thomas carefully placed all the items back in their protective wrapping and sat back against the kitchen cabinet, his mind racing with the implications of what he had discovered. The weight of the secret pressed against his chest like a physical burden. He had dedicated his entire career to protecting the royal family, but now he faced a situation where protecting one member might require exposing others. He thought about Camilla's character during his years of service. She had always been kind to the staff, remembering birthdays and asking about family members by name. She showed genuine interest in the charitable causes she supported and often worked longer hours than necessary to ensure events were meaningful rather than merely ceremonial. The woman described in the diary entries matched the person he had observed, someone who cared deeply about doing the right thing even when it was difficult. Thomas checked the time again. He still had 15 minutes before he needed to complete his inspection and move on to other duties. The normal sounds of palace life continued around him, but everything felt different now. He possessed knowledge that could change the course of history, and every decision he made from this moment forward would carry enormous consequences. His phone buzzed with a text message from his supervisor asking about the progress of his inspection. Thomas responded that he had found a minor maintenance issue that he was documenting and would complete his report shortly. The lie came easily, but it felt like the beginning of a fundamental shift in his relationship with the institution he had served so faithfully. As Thomas considered his options, he realized that simply replacing the items and pretending he had never found them was no longer possible. The knowledge would eat away at him, and he would never again be able to look at the royal family with the same innocent respect he had maintained for 12 years. He had crossed a line, and there was no going back. He thought about approaching Camilla directly with his discovery. She deserved to know that her secret archive had been found, and she might have insights into how to handle the situation responsibly, but contacting her would require explanations that could compromise both of their positions. If word of the discovery leaked before they decided how to proceed, it could create exactly the kind of scandal that Camilla had apparently been trying to prevent. Thomas considered consulting with his immediate supervisor, a man he trusted and who had always demonstrated good judgment in difficult situations. But involving another person would expand the circle of those who knew the secret, increasing the risk of uncontrolled exposure. He also wasn't certain how his supervisor would react to learning that he had thoroughly examined evidence rather than immediately reporting its existence through official channels. The possibility of consulting with external authorities crossed his mind, but Thomas quickly dismissed this option. Taking evidence outside the royal household would be viewed as a fundamental betrayal of trust, potentially ending his career and creating legal complications he wasn't prepared to navigate. It would also remove any possibility of handling the situation in a way that protected Camilla's interests. Thomas made a decision that surprised even himself. He would continue to protect the secret for now, but he would also begin his own careful documentation of the situation. If Camilla had felt the need to preserve evidence for posterity, perhaps the discovery of that evidence also needed to be recorded for future reference. He would create his own account of finding the hidden compartment and his observations about its contents. Using his phone, Thomas took additional photographs of the items, being careful to capture details that might be important later. He documented the condition of each piece of evidence and noted his observations about how long they might have been hidden and when they might have been placed there. His security training included evidence handling, and he applied those skills now with meticulous care. Before replacing the items in their hiding place, Thomas made copies of the most significant documents using his phone's camera. He was careful to capture every page clearly, ensuring that the text was readable and any signatures or seals were clearly visible. The process took longer than he had anticipated, but he felt it was necessary insurance against the possibility that the original documents might be moved or destroyed. Thomas then turned his attention to the wooden box and its contents. The recording device appeared to be sophisticated enough to contain significant amounts of audio, but accessing its contents would require technical expertise he didn't possess. He photographed the device from multiple angles and noted the model information that might help in identifying how to retrieve its recordings if necessary. The memory cards presented a different challenge. They appeared to be compatible with modern devices, but accessing their contents would leave digital traces that might be discovered later. Thomas decided to photograph them without attempting to access their contents immediately. If the situation developed in a way that required their examination, he could address that challenge later with appropriate technical support. The brass key remained mysterious, but Thomas noticed that it appeared to match the style of keys used for safety deposit boxes at traditional banks. If this observation was correct, it might indicate that additional evidence was stored elsewhere, possibly in a location that only Camilla could access. This possibility added another layer of complexity to an already complicated situation. As Thomas prepared to replace everything in the hidden compartment, he noticed something he had missed during his initial examination. The waterproof lining of the space appeared to have been recently adjusted. suggesting that items had been added or removed relatively recently. This observation supported his theory that the hiding place was actively maintained rather than simply forgotten storage. Thomas carefully replaced each item exactly as he had found it, using his photographs as reference to ensure perfect positioning. He then gently lowered the tile back into place, checking that it sat properly and showed no obvious signs of having been disturbed. His years of security training had taught him the importance of leaving no trace when conducting covert examinations. With the physical evidence restored to its hiding place, Thomas faced the challenge of deciding what to do with his newly acquired knowledge. He couldn't ignore what he had learned, but he also couldn't act precipitously without considering all the potential consequences. The welfare of the monarchy, the reputation of the royal family, and his own professional future all hung in the balance. Thomas completed his security inspection of the chamber, checking off items on his official list as if nothing extraordinary had occurred. His hands were steady, and his voice was normal when he called in to report that the inspection was complete and no security issues had been identified. The irony of the false report was not lost on him, but he needed time to determine the most responsible course of action. Over the following days, Thomas found himself observing Camilla with new eyes during his security duties. She appeared to be under some stress, checking her phone more frequently than usual and seeming distracted during public appearances. He wondered if she was aware that her secret archive might have been discovered, or if she was simply dealing with unrelated pressures from her royal responsibilities. Thomas began researching the legal and ethical implications of his situation during his off-duty hours. He consulted legal websites and professional security forums, carefully avoiding details that might identify his specific circumstances. He learned about whistleblower protections, evidence preservation requirements, and the complex laws governing royal household security. The more research Thomas conducted, the more he realized that his discovery had placed him in an unprecedented situation. There were few legal precedents for security personnel discovering evidence of potential wrongdoing within the institutions they were sworn to protect. The conflicting loyalties between personal ethics, professional duty, and institutional protection created a maze of considerations that had no clear resolution. As the weeks passed, Thomas developed a plan that he believed balanced all his competing obligations. He would continue to protect Camilla's secret while gradually positioning himself to respond appropriately if circumstances required action. He would maintain his professional duties flawlessly while quietly preparing for the possibility that the hidden archive might someday need to be revealed to protect either Camilla or the broader interests of the monarchy. Thomas also decided to establish a secure method of communicating with Camilla if the need arose. He researched private communication methods that would allow him to contact her without leaving traces that could be discovered by other security personnel or administrative staff. His goal was to be prepared to warn her if he detected any signs that others were becoming suspicious of the hidden compartment or its contents. The discovery under the kitchen tile had transformed Thomas from a loyal guard into an unwilling keeper of royal secrets. He had learned that sometimes protecting someone meant keeping their secrets even from themselves, and that true loyalty occasionally required actions that appeared to contradict official duties. The hidden archive had revealed not just Camilla's private struggles with institutional ethics, but also the complex moral landscape that surrounded service to powerful institutions. Thomas continued his duties with the same professionalism and dedication he had always shown, but he now carried the weight of knowledge that could change everything. He had become an involuntary guardian of truth, in a world where truth and loyalty sometimes stood in uncomfortable opposition to each other. The discovery beneath the kitchen tile had changed not just what he knew about the royal family, but how he understood his own role in protecting and serving them.